If you're a creative person, there's this one piece of advice that just looms over everything. It's a single sentence that's, both a huge inspiration and honestly a source of paralyzing anxiety. And it comes from Quentin Tarantino.
Make the movie we've never seen. For years, so many of us heard that and thought it meant one thing. You have to be completely 100% original. Like you have to invent something from scratch that the world has never, ever seen before.
But what if we've been getting it wrong this whole time? What if that pressure to be some kind of visionary, to be totally original, is the very thing that's actually holding you back? Well, that's the question we're going to dig into today.
Because, let's be real, chasing pure originality can feel like running straight into a brick wall. It's a trap, and so many of us fall right into it.
Pretty soon, you hit this really frustrating realization. There are only like a handful of basic plots. You've got your romances, your revenge sagas, your coming-of-age stories. They've all been done a million times over. It can feel like you showed up to the party way too late, after all the good ideas have already been taken.
So this brings us to a really fundamental question. If every story has already been told, what is your role as an artist? What actually makes your creation valuable? If it's not about being first, then what is it about?
The answer, it turns out, lies in a totally different word. Not originality, but interpretation. And this one idea, this one shift, it changes everything. Just think about Beethoven's Fury Lise. You know it instantly, right? That melody feels so perfect, so inevitable. It's almost as if it always existed out there in the universe, and Beethoven was just the first person to tune into the right frequency and write it down. But here's what's really interesting. Could another composer have stumbled on those exact same notes? You know what? Maybe. But it wouldn't be for Elise. It would have sounded different, it would have felt different, it would have carried a completely different emotional weight, because the person behind it would have brought their own feelings, their own structure, their own soul to it. And that's our key right there. Interpretation. It's not about inventing the idea. It's about the unique way you frame it, the way you feel it, and how you structure it. It's how you turn a familiar theme into your art. Let's see how this actually works in practice.
Okay, so how do you find your unique interpretation? Well, one of the most powerful ways is to look inward. A lot of the time, the story you really need to tell is your own experience, just in disguise.
The legendary screenwriter Paul Schrader, he tells his students to start with their biggest personal problem. Not a character, not a concept, but that real thing that you are wrestling with. Then you ask yourself, what is the metaphor for that feeling?
This illustrates the concept so perfectly. The director Alfonso Cuarón was broke. His project had just fallen apart, and he said he felt like he was falling through a void, just desperate to get his feet back on solid ground. So did he make a movie about a broke filmmaker? No. He took that raw feeling and he translated it into a metaphor, an astronaut, untethered, spinning out of control in space, fighting like hell to get back to Earth. That feeling became the movie Gravity.
And Paul Schrader did the exact same thing. He was at a real low point in his life, broke, alone, feeling completely disconnected from the world around him. And then he had this realization, he was already living the metaphor. A man in a yellow metal box, moving through a crowded city but totally isolated. A lonely spectator watching life through a pane of glass. And that became Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver.
But interpretation doesn't always have to start with a personal problem. Sometimes it starts with someone else's story and what you choose to do with it. This is all about pouring new wine into old bottles.
Take the film Old Boy. Man, its creative DNA is fascinating. The whole journey starts with a classic revenge novel, The Count of Monte Cristo. That core idea, a guy being unjustly imprisoned, inspired a Japanese manga, which modernized the whole premise. A man gets mysteriously locked away for years, then is suddenly released with zero explanation.
But when the director Park Chan-wook got a hold of the manga, he didn't just film it. No, he reinterpreted it. He completely flipped the central question. It was no longer about, why was I locked up? It became, why, after all this time, was I let go? And that single shift, that one question, transformed a simple revenge story into this dark, modern Greek tragedy about guilt and punishment. That was his vision.
And this idea isn't limited to just one story. It can redefine an entire genre. I mean, before Sergio Leone, American Westerns were pretty straightforward. Noble cowboys, clear lines between good and evil. Leone took all those familiar tropes and just twisted them. His heroes were dangerous, morally ambiguous. Survival was way more important than virtue. He created a whole new cinematic language with that slow, tense pacing and those dramatic close-ups. And in doing so, he basically invented the spaghetti western.
So, at the end of the day, whether you're starting with a feeling or story or a whole genre, the goal is always the same: to filter it through your unique perspective and make it yours.
Think about Neil Blomkamp. His breakout film District 9 was a sci-fi movie about aliens in slums, but it landed so hard because it wasn't just some cool concept. It was his interpretation of growing up in apartheid South Africa. It was about segregation, told through this incredible metaphor. Now, his later films had bigger budgets, but they just didn't connect in the same way. And why is that? Well, maybe it's because they felt designed from a concept, not interpreted through a powerful lived experience.
Which brings us right back to the man who started all this. Quentin Tarantino himself admits that the elements of Reservoir Dogs already existed. Of course there were heist films. There were Hong Kong crime thrillers. But as he says, there was no Reservoir Dogs. There was nothing with his dialogue, his structure, his aesthetic.
And this is the ultimate takeaway. The story you tell does not have to be something the world has never seen before, but it absolutely must be something the world could only have seen through you. It doesn't have to be original, it just has to be yours.
So forget the pressure of trying to invent something totally new. Instead, ask yourself this: what story, old or new, big or small, can only be told, can only truly exist after it has passed through you? What's the story only you can tell?